Today we're diving into another episode of How I Escaped My Cult, and this time it's all about Nexium.
Yeah, this one is really different from the other ones we've covered because Nexium wasn't based in religion at all. It was all about personal development and self-improvement.
But even though the claims were different, the control tactics were very similar. Whether it's religion or self-help, dangerous groups are still about obedience, isolation, and giving up your own power.
We'll break down the episode, the warning signs that were there from the very beginning, and how so many smart, capable people still got trapped.
Because if you think it couldn't happen to you, this story might make you think twice.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in a family with 4 moms and 35 kids. We were members of the FLDS Church, which is a polygamous group run by their prophet Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a life sentence in prison.
I was raised mainstream LDS in Utah. Sam and I have been married for 10 years, and we have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. And today we are back with another episode of How I Escaped My Cult. And this one is all about the Nexium group and the inner group within Nexium called the Vow.
Yes, I had heard a tiny bit about the Nexium group, but I've never seen like a full documentary on them before. I think it was Shalise on Cults to Consciousness had interviews, but I had seen like the preview and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to stomach like a whole episode about it, to be honest. So this documentary, though, didn't go into a ton of graphic detail. Like, it wasn't as graphic as what I was worried it was going to be at, but it did give a very good overview. This is all through the lens of a girl named Jessica and her story of getting brought into this Nexium cult. They didn't talk about whether or not this group is still together.
It made it sound like that in the end, we're kind of jumping ahead here, but in the end, when they do finally catch the bad guy, if you will, they just hinted at now all the people that were affected are out there trying to pick up the pieces of their life. So it made it sound like that it sort of came to an end, but it didn't specify for sure.
Yeah. And it also sounds like because this one man was the center of all of the really bad stuff that was happening. But kind of going back to the beginning, for Jessica, really, she had trauma growing up. Both of her parents were addicts. And really, she was looking for something missing in her life, which is how a lot of stories of people who are going to convert into a group. So there's 2 different types of people in cults. There's ones that are born into it, right? That's all they ever know. And what's the word for that? Mike King always describes that really well, and I don't remember what the word for it is. But basically, you're born into it. And so you just don't know any better. That's just normal life. And then there are people who are brought into cults, and it's typically the people who come into them that it's easier for them to be able to recognize and snap out of it than it is for generationally being inside of one to begin with.
Yeah, and this specific group didn't sound like it was the typical, religious-based cult style that you would typically hear about, where families are growing up in it and kids are being born into it. It seems to be a lot more of bringing outsiders into it under the guise of, hey, we're going to help you pick up the pieces of your life and help you have a better life because of all of the trauma that you've gone through, and sort of hook them in that way. But thankfully, and as it shows here in Jessica's case, though they were very good at manipulating and holding something over people's heads to ensure that they could never leave, which unfortunately a lot of people or groups are like that. It's all about just holding something over someone's head, like, hey, I'm taking your family away, or if you leave, you'll never get to see your family again, or if you leave, you're going to hell, you'll be punished for eternity. There's always something they're holding over their heads to keep them in there. But Jessica, because she wasn't raised with that belief, she was not really going to stand for it when it got to some of the really difficult things that were asked of her.
As it got more and more extreme, for sure. And in this case, like Sam said, it was all about personal development. It started out as a personal development conference. They talked a lot about the fact that there were certain stars or people that were big, like in the know type people, or Hollywood actresses or actors.
I was shocked to
in
see
the group. Yeah.
Some of these faces that we have seen on TV and that they were involved in. In fact, they were kind of making it all happen. They were a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And it was one of those things that I think it also made it more like appealing for people. Like Jessica was saying, like, oh my gosh, look, well, if these people are doing it, then it must be something good. It must be something helpful. Like if it's about personal development and I have these stars to look up to, then they must be doing really well and I want to be like them, right? So having this idea or this persona of I could be glamorous or I could be, you see in some groups, whether it's I can become rich or I can become famous, or there's a lot of times this idealized life, right? Like, oh, they can help me get it all together and then I can be like this person. Definitely help draw her in a little bit at the beginning.
Well, yeah, and especially for someone like Jessica, where her whole her family and her whole life has just been ripped out from underneath her. I mean, both of her parents just left her. She was raised by her grandparents, and so she's gone through so much. So for someone like her, of course she's looking for something else. She's not happy in her current state and in her current life, so she's looking for something else, which we see all the time. And those are the easy targets, unfortunately, the people that have already had such a rough life, because they're so willing and so eager for a change.
Well, and they talked about how when you're searching for community, and I think too, she was talking about being kind of young, and it seemed like she was like in her early 20s. I think that's also just a time when you're looking for friends, you're looking for a community. And so finding this group of people, if you feel like they're like-minded, they think like you, and they are all wanting to be the best versions of themselves. And there's no doubt in my mind that there are probably a lot of good things being taught in these conferences too, right? About self-development. But no one really knew that the main guy, Keith Raniere, had been involved in fraud for years and years, that he made MLMs before, and then he started Nexium as a self-help personal development. He made different programs, right? Executive success programs. A lot of groups too, you see like this hierarchy of being able to be like closer to the inner circle. And we've been seeing that in a lot of these cults that we've been reviewing, where there's this, again, this idolized, oh, I can get to this point and be like this person, but also I have to like take the steps and I have to like earn my way up, right? If I can earn favor with the leader in some way and whatever that looks like, then that's going to help me be that much better.
Right. And when you are surrounded with people that are like you and you become friends with, and everyone is kind of going along with it as a whole, as a group of people, I mean, we've all been in situations where maybe there was something that I'll speak for myself, that I disagreed with, but because everyone else was going along with it, it was hard for me to speak up, because I was just thinking, well, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe it's me. Yeah. Maybe I'm the problem, right? And so when you have the big group of people going along with it, someone like Jessica, I bet, it was easy, or I guess I should say difficult, to say otherwise, rather than just go along with what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and eventually she gets invited into this elite group, and hers was by Allison Mack, who's from Smallville. So famous actress. She already looked up to this actress and had been her mentor in what they called The Vow. So she had made her way, gotten special attention for being, such a devout member to the group, and got invited into this mentorship program. And they talked about how Allison kept telling her how important it was for her and how much she had loved doing it, and just really selling her on the idea of this. And so that all sounds great, but the first big red flag was when Jessica heard about this idea of there being 3 pieces of collateral, something that they could use to blackmail, and how you had to, give up pieces of information about yourself to truly like give yourself to this group. And Jessica even said that was like the first thing that really felt off. And she was like, that feels kind of weird, but if I just have to like give and confess, right? Like confessing what's going on, like things that have been in my past, or things that that are embarrassing. Sometimes too, you see a lot of times where people, when they like join together, the idea of getting stuff off your chest and being completely vulnerable can feel good, right?
Well, yes, but also they used it in a way that made it seem like, oh, this is probably okay, because they said, just so that we know that we can have this trust that we know you can trust us. And, this is the only way we're going to truly be able to help you is if you give us your full confidence and trust. So this proves to us, they're not giving any type of hints at blackmail. It's all about, this is so we can better help you. And then, of course, this giving some very personal information or damning information about oneself became later on a monthly assignment. Mm-hmm. So they hooked them with, okay, now we have this information about you that if it gets out, it could potentially put you in prison or something. Now we already have that. Now you better give us more every single month or we will share the information we have and get you into trouble. So they were very unfortunately clever in the way of getting these people involved.
Yeah, and it was like little bit by little bit. She was saying that after she was part of the vow, all of a sudden she was told, oh, well, you have to call me master and you're considered slave, but it's not a big deal. Those words don't really mean anything. It's like calling me a sensei. There's different words for different groups. That's what these are. And then now you need to say good morning to me. You need to say good night to me. So having control bit by bit by bit until everything was controlled, what they ate, what they wore. Isolation started where they weren't allowed to really hang out with other people. And she said that, as things just got more and more, you just kind of got used to the idea of having to do these things, or else they would get they would say that it was a failure and they would get punished for them. And it would be like having to walk out in the snow in bare feet. And again, I can guess, and they didn't really go into it, that these would be like self-punishments, like them having to do it and report back, like I did this. Yep. And it sounded, I don't know, it was just really interesting because I felt like it sounded similar to confessions. Like you convince people that if they failed in a certain way, that then they would need to go confess their sins, right? And then they would be punished, but the idea that you brought this punishment upon yourself makes it feel validated. Like it's okay for you to be punished because you're the one who failed at something.
Right.
No matter what you're being asked.
Yeah, except for they had a weird twist on this too. They said that if they told Jessica, if you don't do something that you're told to do, someone else will be punished for it. So then she was thinking, oh, I don't want other people to have to suffer because of what I'm doing, right? So they would, I don't know, maybe they handled the situation differently for every person. Maybe they realized, oh, Jessica's someone that doesn't want to do anything to harm another person, so this is the best way to get at her. It's very likely. And another thing that this group would do so well, and unfortunately we see this in so many different groups, is that they would use women to convince other women or other girls to get involved and do things. And the women were actually, in many cases, the ones that were forcing and being a part of the actual damage being done, if you will, like the marking that they would do, burning the initials of this leader in their own group's skin.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that this isn't the first group that we've seen, right? Where women are assisting in the grooming process, basically bringing other women to the leader almost as a sacrifice. And luckily in Jessica's case, it never got that far because as she was told and had the assignment to seduce the leader, and the way to finish this assignment would be to get him to take a picture of her nude. And that would be the proof that she successfully seduced him. And it was okay because she, Allison said, it's okay because I've done it and so-and-so's done it. And so that makes it okay. What'd she say? I even allow you to enjoy it.
Give you permission to enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, right? This idea of the women grooming. And luckily, Jessica, this is the point where she was like, no, this is not okay. I'm not going to do this. And she tries to avoid the situation. She tries to avoid the group. She starts looking online and sees outside sources of information, which can be a huge resource for people who are in these groups to be able to kind of see from outside perspectives what's really happening, because most of the time they're limited in their information as well, right? They're isolated. Yep. And so she's seeing these other things, and luckily she meets up with a group of women who start sharing all of the things that actually happen. And luckily her story, she was able to stop before she got deeper into doing those other things, like going and actually finishing and completing that first assignment, but finding out from other women, like you said, the markings that they would brand the women, and other women were holding down these women.
Yeah, it sounded like everyone in the room was a woman, or a girl, and that was the whole group. So women holding down the other person, and the woman was the one doing the marking and all of that. So somehow he had convinced all of these women to do this. And well,
Not even just convinced, he had them blackmail on all of them.
I was going to say, and how he did that was blackmailing them all and having some information, I imagine, from all of them that could be very damning.
Well, and he videotaped them being branded as well.
Yep.
And he convinced them all that it was okay for him to be with multiple women, but it wasn't okay for women to be with multiple men. They all had to be devout to him.
And of course, that sounds familiar, right? It's so common when man wants to have power over a lot of people, and he has this sex addiction and wants to be able to
abuse and take control over people.
And then it turns into that. Oh, hey, you know what? It's perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural. People over here do it. People back in the day did it, and they use all these excuses to try to feed their appetite. And it's just so frustrating.
So frustrating that, it's the same thing over and over and over. And they don't use the word polygamy because these women weren't married to him and they didn't have the religious context. Mm-hmm. But it was the same. It's the same thing, right? I want to be able to have sex with all of these women and have no repercussions for it, and try to say that it's all consensual, because I will say that I think this is the first group where at least everyone was an adult. They were manipulated. It is definitely a cult. They were blackmailed. It was not consensual in any way, shape, or form. But at least the small bit is that they were all, it seemed like they were all adults. They never said anything about minors or children. And
they didn't say it, but I really hope that is the case. As far as the one telling the story, she was an adult, so I hope that was the case for everyone. Not that it makes it okay by any means.
No, definitely not.
But still, there's something about they were. Even though it wasn't what they thought it was, they were the ones that accepted the invitation to be involved in some way. And then, of course, it went downhill from there.
Yes. Luckily, because Jessica was able to get enough proof, she was able to help the FBI, and they end up being able to arrest Keith. He fled to Mexico, but they still got him down there. And he ended up being found guilty on all charges. Now, he actually went and fought. He did not plead guilty, right? Because he thought that he could prove that this was all consensual. And again, I believe part of that would probably be because they were all adults. Luckily, they were able to prove and show the proof of the manipulation, of the blackmail, the coercion, all of the different steps of him grooming these women to do these things, and the abuses that still happened.
Yeah.
And was charged with 120 years in prison.
Amazing.
So he'll be gone forever.
Amazing that he's gone forever, but yikes, that just goes to show what an evil monster he is to get a sentence like that.
Yeah, again, they didn't go into a whole ton of details in this particular documentary. I kind of wanted to learn a little bit more. Like I said, I'd kind of been eerie of it before because I was like, I don't know if I can deal with the graphic details. But also in this, it was also like very scratched the surface as well as to what those crimes would look like to get 120 years. But It is great that he did. Allison Mack was arrested and pled guilty. She got 3 years for grooming women. And I think a huge piece of the story, which you had mentioned earlier, and even at the end Jessica talks about, was the fact that it was sad and hard that he was taking advantage of these women. But she was saying one of the worst things for her is just that the women were helping harm each other. That this was supposed to be a group that was like independent, strong, empowered women, and to find out that those women were choosing to groom and harm each other on purpose and manipulate one another and drag each other into the same abuses that they were having, she said was just really hard. And I was like, I can imagine like the amount of betrayal in that as well. And like you said, we see that in so many groups.
Yeah. And you know what? Some of the women in this group that were causing the most harm probably didn't want to complete the first assignment, but did. And once they completed that first assignment, then there was that much more being held over their head. And then after that, right, it's a little bit here, a little bit there. Next thing you know, you're doing all of these awful things. You didn't want to do it to begin with.
Exactly.
But now you're too deep, right? And then they just feel like they have to continue on. And with the FLDS, where I came from, some of the women that were involved with what Warren Jeffs was doing, they never wanted to come out because of the way it would make them look, because they were involved in something so horrific that it gets to a point where they just say, either I'm doing this for a bigger, greater purpose, or that's it. That's the only option. They can't accept the fact that maybe they're just doing something evil for an evil man, because once they get too deep, it's hard to accept that they have become what they feared most.
Exactly. So I think overall, again, this is just a good example of how regular people can get sucked into bad situations, how it happens bit by bit. No one ever thinks when they're going and they're finding community and they're finding purpose and they are trying to work on personal development, things like that, that doesn't scream cult at all. But as they progress, if the moment that she felt the first thing was off, right? The moment these red flags pop up, you have to be willing to take a step back and look at it from a broader view, because it's that little step by step that can get people in super dangerous situations.
And it's unfortunate because there are groups out there, self-help groups, that are great and are really helping people and are amazing. So it's unfortunate when you see something like this and it makes you question everything. But that, I think, is a good thing in hindsight, because this is a good example and a good reminder that if you are in a group that seems great and fine and wonderful, the moment they ask you to do something, or the moment there is a red flag, that is your moment. That is your cue to look into it a little bit deeper, or maybe step back and say, okay, is this actually a good thing for me and for the people that are involved? Or maybe are they taking this to an unhealthy extreme? So I'm not saying that all groups are like Nexium, but it's a good reminder to just be cautious.
Yeah, I think another thing too, and this is, I don't know, I've just been thinking of it more as we're watching a lot of these groups and seeing women grooming other women too. I think it's hard as a woman because you want to trust that women are going to have your best interest in mind. It's easy to be skeptical or to fear or hesitate about things when it's a man, I think, because you kind of innately think, oh, that might be dangerous. And sometimes we put trust or faith in women purely because they're women. And I think it's important to look at all people as people, and that everyone is capable of really good and everyone is also capable of really bad. Yeah. And to not put your trust just because they're the same gender as you or because they're in a similar situation, but truly judge people off of their works and how they are as people.
Yeah.
So I don't know, that's just been something that I'm like, oh, it just makes me so sad every time you see another woman be led in purely because she's a woman, so she should have my best interest at heart. And for all of us women out there, we should do our best to be there for other women in the best way possible as well.
Yeah.
So.
Another one down. Man, this has been an interesting series. And if you've been here through all of these different episodes of How I Escaped My Cult, thanks for joining us. And I'm sorry you've had to hear what we've been talking about, because it's not easy to talk about or to hear. But thank you for listening, to hopefully be able to look out and help others if an opportunity arises. And we have a few more episodes to come, so stay tuned. And thank you all so much for being here with us.
We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.